So now I'm going to show you how I like to work with blending and gradients to create some shadows. So it's quite nice sometimes to sort of work from light to dark and create some deeper shadows in certain areas. So what I do is in a particularly dark area, like the space between a boat and a boat's reflection, I might just put a little bit of a dark shade across that section of the bottom of the boat, and then take just water on the brush, and not too much water, just to blend it in. So I'm going to do this in a few areas just to create some different variation in the kind of mark making and the kinds of shadows. I'll start with this boat here, which is quite a dark boat. Just taking a mixture of indigo and neutral tint. Not too much water on the brush. And then clean water, but not too much. I actually think that could be a little bit darker, so I'm just going to add a touch more of the dark colour to that top area. Do another one. From my experience, the reflected shape in the water tends to be a little bit darker in colour to the actual object. So this just helps make a little bit of a distinction between reality and reflected reality. I'm just slightly varying the colour that I choose each time to correspond with the colours in the boats. And you can always adjust the colour slightly. Once you've laid it down, you can always add a bit more of a certain colour to it whilst it's still wet. Now there's a little bit of a graded shadow coming across this building. So you can use this technique in any context. It doesn't have to be a reflection. It can be any shadow that isn't really a well-defined shadow. It's just a gradient from one colour or tone to another. Right, so I've done some gradients in the boats, in the reflections of the boats, and the side of this building. It's also a good technique for if you hang around boat yards, there can be quite a bit of canvas and material like that covering some of the boats. So it was quite a good technique to use, not necessarily just in a straight line, but in a kind of more complicated shape, like a piece of canvas on a boat. So you can just lay down a little bit of colour and then use some water to manoeuvre the colour around a bit into a more blended kind of random shape. I also wanted a little bit of definition between the sort of front of this building and the side of this building, so I did an extra layer of transparent wash on this building here and on the reflection. So we're getting towards the end now, and I'm going to really just start filling in details. I'm going to fill in darker areas that are still not filled in, some shadows on boats, some dark detail on houses, any empty areas that still need filling in. And I'm going to start painting in some of the darker details, such as the windows, doors, and I'm going to use the tip of my brush for these fine details. Also going to fill in a few masts, maybe the reflections of the masts as well. Okay. If you're working with the tip of your brush, you need to really not have much water on there at all. And the tips tend to go quite quickly on these brushes, so you have to change them over quite a lot. I feel it's a bit strong, that, so I'm just going to take it back a bit so that it's not quite so in your face. And maybe go back in with a bit more water. Just to soften it a bit. do with the reflection of those windows. Alright, we're really getting to the end now, and I just want to show you a few things that I do to really as finishing touches. Last time I filled in some more of the details and the empty spaces, some of the windows, doors, a couple of masts. So first I just want to show you how I use the tip of my brush to create a kind of squiggly line, which is a reflection of the mast in the water. I'm going to take not too much water, because it's difficult to use the tip of the brush if it's got too much water on. Just so a dark colour, but not too dark, because you don't want it to be too stark and in your face. A little flourish at the bottom, it tends to get a bit, the lines tend to get a little bit longer the more forward they come. And I'm just quickly going to fill in a bit more of the water pattern around that line. So it's quite quick gestural marks, just taking advantage of the tip of the brush and the different shapes that the end of that brush can make. Okay, so now I'm just going to take a really soft colour, not much darker than this background, just to suggest some of the windows and the structures in the architecture. Sometimes you might feel that you've put a bit too much colour down, but that's okay because you can just take a little bit more water and soften the colour a bit. So some of the chimneys and this is very hazy because it's in the background. So really, really soft, subtle colour is enough to just suggest the position of certain details. And I'm just going to take that colour and do maybe a little bit of a tree here. I'm just adding more water to the parts that I feel a bit too dark. You can even take a kitchen towel and take a bit off. Just manipulate the colour as you go along. Now, there'll be little details in the pattern of the water. As they come towards you, they'll be slightly lighter because they won't be as much. Here we've got a lot of reflected shadow, and you can just put a few details that are a little bit lighter. And a little bit sort of on their own, not part of anything else. So I'm going to do a few more lines like that, and to finish off the piece, I'm going to put a little bit of slightly darker colour at the top and the bottom of the picture, just to help contain the image. And so, for example, a little touch of pink. And take some water and blend it. touch more. And maybe a little bit of a slightly darker shade right at the bottom. Just let it blend in. And do that as well in the sky. I'll show you what it looks like at the end. So this is the finished painting. Yeah, the final steps just involved a few lines, a few extra lines in the water, just doing a little bit of a blend at the bottom and a little bit of a blend at the top, just to help contain the image, and a few touches or a few blobs of colour towards the front. The shapes of the patterns, the reflections tend to get a bit bigger towards the front, so just the odd dash there, and just making sure all the details were finished off. Voila! So that's how I go about things. I hope I've inspired you to make time for yourself to explore painting an atmospheric harbour scene at dusk, and I hope to do more films like this in the future to show you other aspects of painting. Thank you.